All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Deep Devils. I've got Joe, JJ State of the Deep. He writes by JJ. How you doing tonight, Joe?
I'm good, man. How are you?
It's good. It's good to see you again. It sucks because we were keeping in touch on a regular basis during the week, the first few weeks that we're together, and now the schedule has gotten so crazy for me lately. And I don't know about yourself, but we really haven't had a lot of time to touch base this week, and kind of a little bit nervous about how this is going to go.
Well, it's something I was curious about. I wanted to ask you, what kind of
Yeah.
music do you like?
Man, that's a crazy question. I mean, I like all kinds of music except for traditionally I've hated country. Although I started to get into country when there was crossover with Keith Urban, and then I was told, you know what, I kind of like country. And they're like, Keith Urban's not country. I'm like, okay, so I don't know that I like country still because I like Keith Urban and stuff like that. But mostly it's rock, pop rock, metal when I was in the 80s. So, but I've mellowed in my old age. So now I'm kind of a pop rock. I like Coldplay a lot. So I don't know. I'm just kind of pretty mellow now. What about you?
Yeah, I never asked you that. We never talked about music. I
Right,
like
right.
more or less the same. I like classic rock, blues, um, 90s kind of grunge stuff, R&B, like the Motown stuff, and
Wow.
I had my hip hop and breakdancing period also when I was a young lad,
You
which
yeah,
we
so you saw the live where I was talking about the
yeah.
breakdancing, right?
Yeah. I was, I had my breakdancing stage. I was into it when I was a young lad. Um, but I like outlaw country. I'm not a fan of like the pop country per se, which is pretty much what most contemporary country is. It's more pop oriented. I like
I know that.
grittier
Go ahead.
stuff.
Yeah, well, it's funny because like people are probably wondering what the hell's going on. What are you guys even talking about? It's good to catch up, and I'm glad we're doing this. I wanted to mention it's funny because when we first met, and by the way, we are going to be talking about Patsies today. Where I want to make sure that you understand we will be diving into a deep dive thing. But Joe, like I said, Joe and I haven't had a lot of time to communicate during the week, so I think we're just going to do it right now. I did want to say one of the first things when Joe met me, he took me to a country bar, and you're a musician, right? What kind of music do you play? By the way, I don't want to take forever, but what do you play when you're doing your gigs?
I just now I'm just playing bar gigs, just same kind of stuff, classic rock, some outlaw country, some 90s stuff, a little bit of blues. I just do it I do gigs on the weekends, so it's just sort of like a side hustle.
I will tell you this, and this is not going to go well with all of our followers or whatever you want to call them. But when you took me to the country bar, and I'm not a big country fan, right? I didn't know what to expect, and I will say maybe I freaking missed out on life not going to country bars because there was a lot of really pretty ladies, and I have to say that when I saw boots and skirts, I was like, "This, hey, what the hell? Why was I not a thing on this?" Of course, I don't think I'm a cowboy, but I
Yeah.
think I missed out on life.
Well,
So anyway.
I don't spend a lot of time at country bars, but we happen to be passing it, and I said, "Oh, that's a popular bar. I've heard
It
of
was a
that
hop. It
place."
was a hopping bar for sure.
Yeah, I think I was
Yeah.
there once, like 20 years ago or something like that. And I remembered, I'm like, it wasn't really my scene per se, but I
Right.
remembered, hey, it's a lot of interesting
Well,
sights
and
and
again,
sounds.
not to digress forever, but I was out of my element because I'm wearing a Mariner hat and I'm like 5'8" and a half, 5'9". The guys that are having the women there are 6 foot something in cowboy hats. I was completely out of my league, so
We
it
were
wasn't.
all out of our element when we were
Yeah.
there.
Besides the fact that I'm married, what am I even talking about? Besides the fact that I'm married. Anyways, let's let's get it. I just came off like a total horn dog in the thing. Eye candy is still okay. All right, let's go
Yeah,
ahead and
eye
get to
candy's good.
eye candy is good. So we're going to talk about Patsies tonight. I know that when you and I talked about, the Deep Devils idea, we wanted to take some of these foundational issues and really kind of say, well, what are the things that are happening behind the scenes? Perfect example is the Charlie Kirk situation, right? People are saying, oh my gosh, Tyler Robinson's a patsy, and there's people I know there are people who follow my stuff that'll be like, what exactly is a patsy? But they're afraid to say it. Like I know there's a lot of people like they don't understand exactly what a patsy means and why a person would volunteer to be a patsy or what So I think we're going to talk about that, Joe, about what that term really means. And are there different types of patsies? The patsy who's voluntarily a patsy, or the person who's involuntary a patsy, and things like that.
Yeah, and much like a lot of the topics we're going to cover, you're never going to get a official government web page that explains these types of things to you, right? Because a lot of them, go figure, they're all somehow connected in some way, shape, or form to intelligence agencies,
Right.
and and they're also, people have probably heard the term false flag.
Right, which is
Like,
another episode. I think we'll do one specifically on false flags. Yeah, for sure.
right, and the two things are very related, right? They're just, the scale is a little bit different, but they are interrelated, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of the people that do sort of think outside the box and follow alternative theories and things like that, they would know what a patsy is, right? They would know what a false flag is.
You're right.
So
If you're into conspiracy, these terms are not new. But if you're just into true crime, like a lot of people who follow my show, they're true crime people. They're not conspiracy theorists, which is funny because you've watched me with Birdie. Birdie's a little bit more into the conspiracy side, right? And maybe you watch me sand crab and try to crawl the hell out of his show sometimes when he gets into conspiracy theory. Because while I love conspiracies and I really do love a great conspiracy, my show is more bent on true crime. But here we'll let our hair down. We neither one of us probably have a whole lot of hair, but we'll let our hair down and we'll talk a bit about that conspiracy angle of these true crime stories.
yeah, and look, by the way, just to full disclosure, I have,
Like no hair.
yeah. So one of the things you and I talked about from day one after we met, and I know I brought this up, was what is the overlap between true crime and so-called conspiracies, right?
Right.
The cases that we've spoken about, ones that you've spoken about a lot, ones that Birdie has spoken about a lot of the true crime channels, right? The ones that people tend to really get hooked into are the ones that seem to have a lot of unexplained things,
Right.
circumstances,
Right.
evidence, a lot of things that are not clear cut, right? And one might consider that some of that stuff exists because there's a conspiratorial nature to what's going on, right? So
Right.
you name the case. I mean,
Well, and
there's many of them.
let me do that. Let me name the 5 cases that I'm kind of looking at, and 3 of them, everybody, not everybody, 3 of them, Patsies, are a major theory, right? Luigi Mangione allegedly shot Brian Thompson, CEO of United Healthcare in New York. And there's a large number of people who said, look, the shooter was wearing a mask. Luigi Mangione is a sweet boy. There's no way Luigi Mangione shot that man. He's a patsy. That was one of the first things that came out. He's a patsy. They fingered some poor kid out of college and blamed the shooting on him when it's not him. He's a patsy and a fall guy and isn't the one who did it. Idaho 4, Bryan Kohberger, he's in witness protection. He's a patsy. He didn't really do it. Somebody else did it. They just blamed it on Kohberger. Maybe he even agreed to to be the patsy and fall so that he can spy on people inside the prison system as a bad guy and get inside drop because he's still working for the feds. That's another type of patsy. 2 of my stories now. Third story, Charlie Kirk, Tyler Robinson. He's a patsy. That guy didn't shoot Charlie Kirk. The shot came from the side, came from behind, whatever the case may be. So 3 of the 4 or 5 cases I follow. Now I can say, to finish up the list, Long Island serial killer. Nobody's saying that Rex Heuermann is patsy. So at least I've got that. Nobody's saying, oh, well, that's not true. I did hear one person, actually somebody sent me a video saying Rex Heuermann is actually innocent. And it's because he hung out with cops and he knew he was a swinger that they blamed this on him. So I did actually hear somebody tell me Rex Heuermann's a patsy. So I digress. There's 4 out of 5. And then the 5th one, Mickey Steins, the sheriff that shot the judge in the judge's chambers. Today, nobody is saying that I've heard that Sheriff Steins might be a patsy. But that's 3 or 4 of the 5 cases. And here the term patsy comes up. And somebody might ask me, and I swear I'm going to give you time to talk, Joe. Dude, do you think everybody is a patsy? I get that all the time.
Well, also, there's the Aurora shooting case,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
Patsy came up early on in that case, for different reasons. Now, one of the things that I'm going to sort of introduce once we get into it is connections to some other controversial things that we know about, like MK Ultra, that have a relationship to this type of thing that we're talking about. Because what type of patsies are there, right? You've got,
Right.
depending on how you look at it, there's different sort of ways that you could structure somebody being a patsy. So, like, I mean, do you want
It's
to get
funny
into
because I
that a
don't.
little bit?
Well, it's yeah. See, I'm having problems because I want to talk about scopolamine. Have you ever heard of that drug, scopolamine? I think I'm pronouncing it right. And it's funny because we're not even fully introducing the topic, Patsy. But you said something, and I'm like, I want to just. I'm just going to riff off this real quick. There's a drug. I saw a special on this on CBS or some crazy thing long time ago about a crazy drug. I think it was called scopolamine. It's a powder, and you could literally put it in your hand and you go blow it into somebody's face. And if they sniffed it in, they would become almost completely compliant. And you could then say, "Let's go to your bank and pull out a couple $1,000s and hand it to me." And they would just go, "Okay, cool." And they would go do it, and they would be seen on camera walking to the bank machine and pulling the money out, and then later on have no memory that they did that, and they'd be like, "Well, you did it because you're on camera and you've seen it." That drug would do that to people. It would just completely make them compliant, and they'd be like, "Yeah, sure, let's go." And but yet, and then if you stay in the wings, you could be like, "Well, obviously he did it. You just watched him do it." So could that be done for shooters? Could a drug like that put somebody in a state in which they're like, "Hey, why don't you pick up this gun and go do that?" Okay, cool. And then you just go do it. And then later on, you have no memory, which is a lot of what happened with the James Holmes situation to get ahead on that shooting. But, anyways,
Yeah. Just a quick thing about MK Ultra. Um, I had mentioned this in one of our previous videos, that program on Netflix called Chaos. It was about Charles Manson and the Manson family and their connections to one of the guys that was associated with MK Ultra, who just so happened to also be uh, connected to Jack Ruby, right?
yeah,
And so MK Ultra was essentially a mind control program by the CIA. It was declassified, and there's a lot of speculation as to what it was really for,
yeah,
because of the official story varies depending on what account you listen to. That it was, again, to deal with maybe spies from other countries, espionage related stuff.
right.
But then,
It's a truth serum and whatever. Yeah, I mean,
right.
before you go, I mean,
But then
MK
there's a
Ultra.
flip of that.
Yeah,
The other angle is that's widely discussed and has been, is that it was a program to create assassins, right?
right, right.
And,
And
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 uh,
and and that's the thing. Like people don't believe it's weird. It's a weird phenomenon because you talk about MK Ultra being declassified, and we know this to be true, right? But it's amazing what portion of the population completely check out as soon as you say MK Ultra. Oh gosh, another freaking conspiracy. MK, like they don't even believe it's a real thing. They think it's a made up program. And all I would do to say that is, maybe one day we'll break down the history of MK Ultra. But our government, in my belief and the documents that I've seen, our government has experimented with how can you get people to comply with what you want to do? How do you turn an unwitting person into your personal assassin so they can go take out the leader of another country and get them under their control? And so we experimented with how to control the mind. How do we control people and make them into our unwitting assassins? That kind of stuff would be considered a little bit top secret because they don't want you to know that they're experimenting with mind control. Maybe unwitting subjects are coming in and being put under some kind of hypnosis or drug or whatever to see what they can get them to do. That stuff happened and did get declassified. So that's the root of some of these MK Ultra, and whether we were trying to groom assassins to, hey, can we get somebody close to the president of China and he's under our control because we put a drug into him and he just does our actions. And so that was a thing we were working on. But
you're freezing up intermittently, just so you know.
that sucks. Hopefully it's
Yeah.
hopefully it's just your end. I think when we get done, the videos will upload perfectly on both sides and it should be clean. But
Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, this speaks to the foundations of what a patsy is, how that term initiated, and what would be the reason for it, right? Like, why would they exist? Why do so many people say, when like, for example, you brought up Bryan Kohberger, right? And we've all heard that, oh, he's a Fed, so and so is a Fed. Well, if you're working for the feds, and it's your job to be the fall guy for something, then you're really essentially an operative too, right? But by
Right.
definition, you're also the patsy because if you're somebody, let's just say, that didn't commit the crime or may have been peripherally associated with it, but wasn't either the sole perpetrator or maybe they weren't a perpetrator at all, then you would be a patsy. But if you're working for the feds, then how do you define what that is, right? Is it just an
I
informant? Well, you're
right.
taking the fall for a crime, so that also makes you a patsy.
And and I think it's what we're going to get into very shortly is there's different types of patsies. There's the patsies who again knowingly are a patsy and took the fall for something as an arranged upon deal with the hey, don't worry, later on after the public is convinced that we got the right guy, we'll cut you a sweet deal and you'll get out and go live on an island in Jamaica somewhere and spend the rest of your life living luck. That's one kind of patsy. But there's also the kind of patsy who and here's where it gets convoluted. Maybe is involved in something they shouldn't be doing, and then unbeknownst to them, they're about to be fingered for a murder. But because you already did something you shouldn't have been doing, it's hard for you to convince the public that I didn't kill the guy. I may have done this other illegal thing, but I didn't kill the guy. And so you set somebody up by having them do something that compromises them, and then you throw a whole bunch of extra shit they didn't realize they were doing. Hey, just walk in and rob this thing, and then they don't know that you're going to kill somebody, and they're going to blame it on them for killing the person. Is another type of patsy. And I think
Right.
we're going to get into it really good when we get into Lee Harvey Oswald and that question that it got asked. I'm trying to hold back the conversation until we get to a slide on Oswald. But the question about why would we do it? Why would the government, for example, why would the government have a patsy? What purpose would that serve? I think Oswald is a great place that I would have an example of why the government might want to do something like that. So kind of stepping through some slides for our memory purposes. I'm going to grab through this. You and I were talking about the origins of the term patsy, and it was funny because you had mentioned an individual's name, and when I was doing my research, I was like, oh, that's cool. There's actually a guy named Patsy something, and I couldn't find it, but I did find this, which is the same thing. That back in the vaudeville days, they would have I think there was a character you said was a character named Patsy. I mean, I'll let you tell the story, but it kind of became the kind of in thought. You know how they have those jokes about little Joey did this or whatever. That kind of thing became the inside word. A patsy was somebody who was kind of naive and had and was in the and take the fall for something in these vaudeville shows. So tell us a little bit about that person that you researched.
Yeah, well, I dug into it, and because I didn't know where the origin came from. I've heard the term forever. I never knew where the origin was, and I got more or less the same thing that you have here in this slide, but I dug a little bit deeper, and I came up with so prior to that, that was like 1890s, the 1860s. There was a vaudeville sketch kind of show that had a character called Patsy Bolivar or Bolivar. I saw it spelled two different ways. That was always the one blamed for everything. And so every time the kids in school were goofing off or causing trouble, or shooting spitballs, the
Patsy did
teacher
it.
would turn around. They'd all yell, you know, Patsy's name, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of that predates the other stuff that you put up on
and and
screen.
and 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 so the gist of it is basically it would it's just like you said, they'd be goofing off, and when the teacher goes to catch them, they would just say it was Patsy, which is at the root of what a patsy is. Somebody did something, and then when you go to find out who did it, they just point to somebody else and say, well, it was Patsy. Patsy did it. It's the Patsy. The Patsy did it. It wasn't the sniper over here. It was the patsy, the guy over there instead. The guy is the obvious choice. That's the thing. The patsy is the obvious choice. It's not the person who did it. It's the obvious choice that the teacher will always blame because Patsy is always getting in trouble, so it's Patsy. Yeah, you got anything more on that before we move on to another slide?
Well, it's just interesting that that transitioned to so many years later, right? I mean,
Right.
it's 1860s, and
That's
people
yeah. It's quite
use the
the
term
origin.
a lot, especially when it comes to a lot of the shady stuff that happens where you clearly are not getting the real story.
Yeah. And so the next thing I discovered when I was walking through this is, journalism started to pick up and use the term patsy. So it's a very old term, but now journalism starts to use it. In the 1930s, there would be news articles talking about a patsy, which is the same kind of idea that somebody did something and they blamed it on good old Patsy. Instead of who actually did it, so that they could throw somebody in jail for something, and the people who want to run the criminal organization can continue to run their criminal organization because the patsy went away for it. You got any more thoughts on that real quick?
No, I mean, I think that kind of
That
aligns
kind of
with
that
what
kind
I
of
was saying.
sums that part up. Yeah, yeah. All right, let me
Because
move
I mean,
on
look
to
at how that's like the 1930s, right?
30s.
And we're
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about patsies now,
yeah, yeah.
almost
Right.
100
Patsies have
years later.
right. I mean, the groundwork was established that it's a known thing. Uh, journalists talked about it. It was a known thing. It's an obvious thing that would happen, that somebody doesn't want to go down for something, so they find a fall guy. That would be another way to say a patsy, a fall guy. A scapegoat is another way, although I think scapegoat, we're going to talk a little bit about how the difference is between a scapegoat and a fall guy, or a patsy. I would say probably the most popular and well-known quote unquote patsy that a large number of Americans believe John F. Kennedy was not assassinated by the lone gunman in the book repository. We talked about I said library, and you're like, it's actually kind of book repository. I'm like, shit, you're right. It's the book repository. But anyways, the lone gunman story, would believe it or not, if you look at statistics, the majority of Americans do not believe Lee Harvey Oswald was the lone gunman. And yet the government has stuck by the story forever until just recently, when we said we're going to kind of start unsealing some documents. Now that everybody's dead, by the way, the government, who has been saying all along, yes, it's the lone gunman, and in fact, we'll have a trial and we'll show you how the magic bullet bounced through some guy's wrist and out a neck and over here and and he shot all these different people, one bullet or whatever. Like they did it right to your face, bold-faced, in my opinion, lie. And now, after all the time's gone by and people are dead, they're like, yeah, you know what? There was probably more than one shooter, and we're going to admit that now at this point. Yet Lee Harvey Oswald goes down as the patsy. And he literally said, and you and I were talking about this, he literally said on camera, it's an old black and white thing of him being walked out, by tons of reporters. And he goes, yeah, I worked at the book repository, but I have no idea what's going on. I'm just a patsy. And he literally said that on camera. I don't know what's going on. I worked there that day and they just came and arrested me, and I don't know what's going on. I'm just a patsy. And so I get your thoughts on that first before I riff on why the government, for example, could use a patsy and what the purpose would be. But what are your thoughts on, the most infamous patsy of all time?
Yeah, I mean, so many documentaries have been done at this point about it, and I mean, I think
Great ones too.
Yeah, pretty clear that either he wasn't involved at all, or he had a peripheral role, and he was the fall guy, basically. And the question is, like, you look into his history and how he defected to Russia, and then, he was disenchanted with capitalism, and et cetera, et cetera. I mean,
And we were
the
going
way
through the
I
big
think about
communist
it,
scare. Yeah.
well, the way that I look at stuff like that is any official story that gets to the public, right? It makes it to the public. I question, you know, um, like they could say anything they want about him, right? After he's dead, right? They could say anything they want, because as people probably know, he was assassinated shortly after by Jack Ruby. Um,
Right.
so, which right there, that when you start learning about Jack Ruby and connections that he had, what he was involved with, connections to the mob, he had connections to the CIA. You
I
know,
feel like Joe, I feel like we need to take just a moment. I realize this is a story that most Americans probably know, but I think maybe a younger generation might not entirely know. We don't have to hit it big, but I want to talk about Jack Ruby just shortly. The whole Patsy narrative. If Lee Harvey Oswald wasn't the shooter, he didn't get to have his day in trial. Why? Because a man by the name of Jack Ruby literally came up to him on the steps of a courthouse, I think it was, or maybe it was a perp walk to the police station, and shot him dead in front of everybody. and he never got to have his day in trial. So he said, I'm a patsy, I didn't do it. And then some guy comes up and shoots and kills him. That guy himself had a terminal illness and was going to die. A lot of people said, how convenient that the guy who goes and kills Lee Harvey Oswald himself has nothing to live for. He's on a ticking time clock. He's dying of something. And then people mysteriously all over the place started to die connected to the shooting of John F. Kennedy. And so that became the example of, and why I often say, I don't know that Tyler Robinson is going to live through this. He's probably going to get killed in prison because when you don't want to have a trial and you don't want your patsy to say all the reasons why they weren't the one who did it and make their case. So they often, in my cynical view, they often have a stroke of guilt. They feel bad. They hang themselves, whatever the case may be, because then you can't have a trial and everybody just follows the patsy narrative.
Right. And there's always multiple layers to these types of things, right? It's not just, oh, Oswald says he's a patsy. Well, now there's this other guy who takes him out. And then as you learn more and more over the years, you find out that Jack Ruby was visited in jail by Jolyon West, who was like connected to the MK Ultra program. And supposedly when he saw Jack Ruby, which Ruby wasn't his real last name, by the way, he like went crazy. So that's the rumor, right? And that guy, Jolyon West, is connected to other things. He's connected to the Manson family and other types of things. He was a psychologist, and he was connected to the CIA. So that's a really good sort of landmark example because it's got multiple layers that have connections to intelligence agencies.
Yeah, and I want to bring 2 points about it because I want to get back to the why the government could do something like that. But I want to get back. What you just said was, oh well, Jack Ruby was also visited by so and so who was in the CIA, who was in, and you start doing. And here's the thing: most Americans start to check out at that point. They want. This is my thing. Americans, for the most part, are lazy. They want an easy answer. So Lee Harvey Oswald shot him is super easy. We got the bad guy and we go to bed and we feel good. Then somebody comes along like you and me and we're like, wait a minute. He was, is it not odd to you that Ruby that shot him like that? And he, and that he was just visited by so-and-so, and you can get people to go with you for just so long before they start to check out. Like, you know what? That's too convoluted. I'm just going to go with the guy shot him from the, from the book repository. And that's just sadly the way it is. Like, I'm always fighting that narrative. If it gets too complex for people, and I would argue that's exactly what government conspirators would count on, is the American people are lazy. And if you get too far down the weeds and you have to go 3 or 4 levels deep to get the bad guy, people will check out long before that and they'll just accept the patsy. It's just the easier thing.
Yeah, and guess what term was created after the Kennedy assassination?
I'm trying to think what you're going at.
Conspiracy theory.
Oh, yes. They coined the term conspiracy theories. Right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Because people started questioning the narrative, right? From the Warren Commission narrative and conveniently a new term emerged into the public consciousness.
And there is literally, in my opinion, and it's been a long time since I dug it up, so I'm not going to provide the receipts here today, but there's literally documentation that I believe I've seen that the government created the term conspiracy theorist and used it as a tool to weaponize people's minds. Because once they got you to hear the term conspiracy theorist and associate it with something crazy and radical, then they realize they can just apply the term, well, that's just a conspiracy theorist, and you shut down again. You don't think. So, and a great example, getting ahead of myself, is if they find flat earthers to be radical, right? They'll say conspiracy theorist. And then if they say, oh, you don't think Charlie Kirk was shot by Tyler Robinson, you're one of those conspiracy theorists. And most people will go, oh, flat earthers are conspiracy theorists. I'm a conspiracy theorist. Well, I don't want to be associated with that. And so they just try to make the term conspiracy theorist associated with something that's so painful for you to be associated with that if you hear it, you're like, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, and people freak out.
I have a conspiracy theory. I think you're having one done to you right now because you keep freezing up.
That's so weird. When we get done with this, let's keep hoping that it stays good on the final cut. Otherwise, we're going to have to record everything.
Okay, well, hopefully it doesn't happen in the final product. But yeah, I mean, look at, how many times has that moniker been used to dismiss people,
Yeah.
right? That's crazy conspiracy theories. I just want to say this too. There is a common thread that moves through just about everything we're going to talk about going forward, right? That's the one thing I want to point out to people. Most people will be able to figure what that thread is, but there is a common thread. It runs through all of these things, right? We talked about Operation Mockingbird last week, right? The media, right, they put forth a narrative. It, think about all the true crime cases we all followed and that we talk about. There's an official narrative, and the media always seems to jump on that. Now, what happened immediately after the Charlie Kirk assassination? The same thing that happened during the whole Idaho 4 case. Oh, there's all these crazy conspiracy theories floating around online,
Yeah.
right? That's the oldest trick in the book. Dismiss anybody who questions an official narrative or questions something related to the power structure. That's
Let
going
me
on a
give you
lot with
let
Charlie
me give you
Kirk right now.
the big I want to give you one of the biggest examples. It made me furious. 9/11, September 11th in America, people started to really question things like, why did Building 7 collapse? And then President Bush went on and made an impassioned speech from the pulpit, if you will, and said, let us not tolerate crazy conspiracy theories that try to shift the blame from those who are responsible to others. And so he set the tone. If you start to ask questions about Building 7, you are shifting the blame away from who we told you was guilty, and we will not tolerate that crazy conspiracy talk. And that's that was a moment, and media, they did it. They said, oh, we're not going to talk crazy conspiracy theorists because we're not going to be. And he even set the bar. This was another Bushism. You're either for America or you're against America. If you don't buy the story we told you, you're against America. And people were telling people you should get the hell out of this country. If you're either for America or you're not. So if you're questioning, let's not tolerate crazy conspiracy theories, and you should probably leave the country if you don't believe the story. And I felt like that 9/11 story started to really get in people's heads in the media, and the conspiracy whole tag really, really went into good effect on that event. But
Well, it's funny, DA, when you bring up, 9/11, that's, 2001. I believe, and, I studied psychology in college. I actually went to school to become a psychotherapist. I took a lot of different psychology classes. I've read a lot of books. Humans are malleable, right? The way you think is malleable. And psyops, what we've talked about a lot, and I'm sure most people have probably heard the term. I believe that there's a shelf life for psyops. And I believe that the CIA and the other agencies that have the best psychologists in the world working for them, they know this,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So, what has happened over since 2001 to now, right? There's been an awakening that's been happening with people. And if you're someone like me and probably like yourself that's sort of more libertarian, I'm not right or left or whatever, I don't buy into the BS narratives. You see the awakening happening, right? Because you may
yeah,
follow accounts that are sort of in line with a certain way of thinking. And it's just in the last 5.5 years, I have noticed a dramatic shift in how people look at things. And I'll give you a perfect example. The whole MAGA movement, right? You have like these diehard Trump supporters, right? Well, with what's been going on related to foreign influence and the Epstein files in the last several months, a lot of those people that were just ride or die Trump supporters have turned on him
yeah,
because of what's been going on. the reason I bring that up is because some would argue that Trump is like a cult type figure, right? And he had this sort of spell on people. Well, spells have a shelf life. Psyop, spell,
Yeah.
same thing, right?
Yeah.
I believe they have a shelf life. And I think we're getting to the point now in society where more and more people are waking up and are being more receptive to looking at these events throughout history and saying, hold on a second, because just think about it. If you can be uh, persuaded to believe a somewhat far fetched narrative, right? There's a mechanism that allows for that, and
Yeah.
what I believe, and one of the mechanisms that I think, which relates to all this stuff, is cognitive dissonance, right? People have a schema in their mind about certain things, the way the world is, the way governments are, uh, about themselves, their own preconceived ideas. Cognitive dissonance arises when they're confronted with information that challenges those deeply held or strongly held beliefs, right? The way that they look at the world, the way that they look at themselves. And it actually will shut down critical thinking because it's a defense
Yeah.
mechanism.
For
It's
sure.
it's a
Yeah.
defense mechanism. So that whole, oh, you crazy conspiracy theorist, this, that, and the other, that gets embedded in people's minds, and they don't want to be considered a conspiracy theorist, right?
Right. Right.
But I think there's, like I said, there's a shelf life for things. And I think now
Yeah.
people don't care as much about being
Yeah.
called a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, and in fact, I personally, and it's a mnemonic, or not a mnemonic, it's a semantic issue, which is that I've started to say I'm a critical thinker. It really, honestly, is critical thinker and conspiracy theorist are, in my terms, synonymous terms. It's just that it's more palatable for me to say I'm a critical thinker, because if I were to call myself a conspiracy theorist, the word's been ruined, and you're an idiot and a moron if you're a conspiracy theorist. You must believe, insert whatever your worst imaginable conspiracy is, and you can be discredited. Now they haven't completely ruined critical thinking, so I use that a little bit more. I wanted to take a moment, if you don't mind. I know we've been beating Harvey Oswald a lot, but I want to briefly not lose what I was going to say about why would the government, for example, kill in a scenario. I'm not saying this is what happened. I'm going to give you a scenario. Why would the government themselves kill a president of the United States and then blame it on a patsy? Let me give you an example. First of all, one hand doesn't know what the other hand does in the government. But if some people in the government had decided, and there was rumors, for example, that John F. Kennedy wanted to move us off the gold standard, for example, or he wanted to change the banking system, he wanted to make a major change in currency. If the bankers, who make a crap ton of money and can hire anybody to do anything, decided that it is bad for the country, it'll ruin the country if John F. Kennedy has his way. It'll literally ruin the country. There are people who swore an oath to our country to protect the country against enemies, both foreign and domestic. You can convince a certain element within your own government that your president may be a domestic danger to the country. He literally could ruin the country. And therefore, your government could conspire, in part, to assassinate its own president in order to save America against a domestic threat, which is the president who's out of control and is going to lead us into a major problem. But could they just tell you, hey, fellow Americans, wanted to let you know today we killed John F. Kennedy because he was a danger to you. Don't worry. Over 500,000, or not, over half the country voted for the guy. Well over half the country. I think it was like, what, 60%, something ridiculous. Hey, sorry we killed your guy, but trust us, it was for the good of the country. No, what you do is you get a patsy. You'll never admit that you did it for the good of the country. You might even feel good at the end of the day that you did it for the good of the country, but you got to find a patsy, somebody that you can say, we didn't do it. That poor bastard did it. And everybody feels good at the end of the day, and people feel justified. So I just wanted to give you an example of times that governments, you could logically perceive, if the government thinks that the country itself is in danger by somebody's actions, but they can't just admit to you, America, hey, we're going to go kill somebody, which sounds like you can't do it. It's unconstitutional. It's against our civil liberties to just go kill somebody because you don't like their political opinions. But you can have an element in your own government who decides that for the good of our country, that person has to be taken out. But you can't admit it. So you have them taken out and you find a patsy to blame it on.
Well, first of all, they couldn't ever admit that because we have an elected, government supposed to be by and for of the people, right? So it wouldn't be up to somebody else to determine if the president is bad for the country. It would more likely be
Right.
bad for certain interests. So
Correct.
extra government type of
Right.
things, right? It would
Yes.
be bad for the bankers. It would be bad for
Yeah.
powerful entities. And I don't know if you saw the recent interview with I, that colonel, that retired colonel. She was pretty explicitly stating what I've always said and been saying for years, that the CIA doesn't work for the government, and they're not controlled by the government. You know, they actually work for an elite, quote unquote, deep state, you know, banking.
Bankers.
Like
Yeah.
it's not really controlled by the government. I've been saying that for years. I've tried to I need years I've told people that's the way it really works, and it's pretty
Just
clear.
like, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean it's pretty clear that that's the case. I mean, how many books have been written about rogue elements within the CIA? I mean,
Right.
and other agencies. I'm just using the CIA as an
And
example because
I'm
this
trying to remember
colonel
the president that
specifically
said it, but
spoke about it.
there was a president that flat out said, this is an example of, what president was it? I'm so embarrassed that I don't remember this, that basically said we need to watch out for the military industrial complex, which he's
I
referring
think it
to his
was
own government.
Eisenhower, right? Wasn't it
Eisenhower.
Eisenhower?
It might have been, yeah, warning about the dangers of the military industrial complex that works for the government, and they have all of our arms and all our munitions, but they've gotten out of control, and they are protecting their money, and they want us in wars because they make money off of wars. And he's like, look, we have to protect our country from the military industrial complex. So it gets very complex when it comes to politics, and one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, and all those things.
Right. And to expand on your question, your original question is like, why would, you know, there be a need for a patsy, right? For certain events, there could be so many reasons, right? Everybody's seen a million movies about assassins and hitmen, right?
Yeah.
And it's usually either government related or big business related, right? Oh, this guy's going to screw up this deal. He's not playing ball, whatever. We've all seen the tropes. So I guess it's really a matter of, in each given situation, do we really know what the motives are? Because
Right.
there could be some that are obvious, but what do we always talk about? Things are never done for just one reason,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because
And right.
they're not going to risk a major operation getting exposed for just one thing. To make it
Right.
worth it, the risk, you know, the cost benefit analysis, they would carry out something that would accomplish several goals.
Right.
And
Right. And again, this is the reason why, when we're looking at something like a Charlie Kirk situation, you need to start asking, in my opinion, who all benefited from it, because it may have been more than one objective that was met by that. And does it make sense that it's just the guy who is a wacko liberal waging war on conservatism? But anyways, and again, to plug what I do on my channel, I've got a book that I'm reading. The Whitney Webb book that you recommended on One Nation Under Blackmail. And the problem is with that book, which is a two volume set, enormous book and very meaty, is Americans check out. It's too much. It's all there. It's all like a critical mind can read it and go, even if I can't follow this logic, I see there's corruption in our system, plain as day. But most people won't read that book, and they'll just check out because it's easier to accept the patsy, which is what we're going to
sure, and
continue to
you
talk
know
about.
what? I've also talked about this a lot, and this is really has to do with psychology as well. Your average person, and I totally get it. Like you're working, you're hustling, you're, you know, working long hours, or you have a family and your job, and you just want to come home on the weekends and relax and, you know, barbecue or have a few drinks or hang out with the family. Like not everybody has that type of drive inside them to seek out things.
Yeah.
And it's some people are just wired that way, and I've always been wired that way. You know, I want to know. I want to know more. I recognize patterns. And so I want to seek out, even if you never come to the answer, it's my nature to seek out answers. And
Right.
I think I have a good balance of, a lot of crazy life experiences also to go along with educational stuff where I studied the criminal mind. I studied the way the human mind works and human behavior. And that in and of itself is useless if you don't know how to connect the dots and tie that in. I'll tell you this
Right.
real
And
quick. This real
yeah.
quick little quick anecdote. I don't know if I ever talked about this before. Probably not. Like 25 years ago, remember blogspot.com?
Yes.
Google Blogspot. It was like one of
Yep.
the original blogging
Yeah.
sites.
And then you could you could create a blog at blogspot.com. Yeah.
Right. And I started a blog back then. And one of the first sort of articles or blogs that I did is I talked about how do, what enables politicians to compromise, right? Like that was sort of my thesis statement to find out what is it based on what I know, what I believe, and what I can find out that allows them to compromise.
Yeah.
And you think about it, it's like you have somebody that maybe gets into government or big business or the military or intelligence, whatever, with good intentions, right? And as you're a human, our natural drive is to move forward with something, right? To achieve, especially high achieving type of people. So you want to succeed in whatever it is that you're doing. Well, if you get far enough down the road in any job, any career in government, whatever it is, a sport, an art, music, whatever it is, acting, you invest enough time and energy into it, you get to a certain point, you might be presented with a scenario in which you could walk a straight line and this is where you're probably going to end up. But if you take a little detour here, you're
Right.
going to be guaranteed X, Y, and Z, more success, more money, more connections. You're going to be considered for this and that, and so on and so forth down the road. Now, my
Yeah.
hypothesis, based on psychological principles, behaviorism, is once you compromise once, each subsequent time you're presented with that situation, it's
Is
easier. It
easier. Right.
becomes easier each
Yes.
time to
Yeah.
compromise.
Right.
And so, I mean, I apologize. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but it's related to all this stuff
Yeah.
because your average person can't conceive that people could do these things, that people could be so corrupt, that they could sell out citizens of their country, that they could harm other people, steal from other people. But humans are fallible, right?
Yeah.
And in the pursuit of whatever it is, whether they're a sociopath or a narcissist, people make compromises to
Yeah.
varying degrees. And
Yeah.
a patsy could be somebody who's really ambitious, like someone who gets sort of steered or gets connected to some kind of powerful entity, whether it be big business or government or whatever, and they're a high achiever. I mean, just look at the track record. It's really bright kids,
Yeah.
scholarships, et
Yep.
cetera, fellowships, PhD students,
Yep. Straight
and
A students. Yep.
yeah, and so they're like anybody else. They want to achieve. You give them a little taste of something, and like you're going to be in this prestigious position if you do X, Y, and Z. Some people compromise. People make compromises.
And I don't know if we have time to do it. I think we will make time, but the James Holmes things brings that whole thing up to me as well. The full ride scholarship neuroscientist. He literally was involved in DARPA programs and stuff like that for the government. And then you have to ask yourself, did he make some choices and put himself in a situation where he could be used as a patsy because he was willing to compromise something, do something maybe he was, if once you start down a slippery slope, then you can be used by people who maybe don't have your best interest in heart. We'll get to that a little bit. I know we have a slide on that as well, and I want to try to move through some of this. I think we're done really talking about. We talked, Lee Harvey Oswald to death. We were going to talk about maybe playing the actual clip where just for a moment he says, "I don't know what's going on. I'm a patsy," but at the end of the day, that literally is all that happens. It's just a short clip. He's got police around him or whatever, and he's like, "Yeah, I was in the book repository, but I have no idea what's going on." I think he had a black eye too. They asked him on camera, "What do you have a black eye for?" Anyways, and then that was kind of the end of that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. At first, I thought, but in the interest of time, maybe we won't spend a lot of time, other than to say to you that Oklahoma City bombing is another example. There was a lot of people who thought that Nichols and McVeigh, the two guys that were basically blamed for this, were just part of a much bigger conspiracy, that they got certain things from a military base, that they were involved in a bigger conspiracy, and that they were the patsies to take the fall for what was a larger government operation. And you wonder, why would the government bomb its own Murrow building, for example? But that was an example. And again, there was an argument made in public that the grand jury didn't see a whole bunch of the testimony, and the defense said that people don't know exactly what happened. There was a lot of stuff that didn't make it into the trial, didn't make it to the court, because they wanted a simple answer. Timothy McVeigh is a patsy. He's going to go down for this. Bad guy, did something horrible. And again, Americans check out and don't really want to question too much. And I'm not saying that he is or isn't a patsy, or if he didn't do it. That's not what I'm saying. I was just using it as an example, as a famous, some people believe Nichols and McVeigh were only part, and there's documentaries, really good ones, showing that there was other people involved in that, but these two guys took the fall for it. Maybe a patsy. Now, again, we talked about James Holmes, and I love this slide, by the way. What a beautiful looking slide. Yay for AI. They do some pretty cool shit.
They do.
But I got to say, James Holmes, young kid, high school student, was giving speeches on crazy topics like temporal illusions, talking about how people can be made to have false beliefs about things that happen and lose space and time relations. That kid was actually doing presentations on how we can make people have false memories of things. And then he gets implicated in shooting up a theater in which he literally said, "I don't know what happened. I was like in a fog. It was like I was playing a video game. And the question that became asked very early on, what's with this guy? Because he was a full ride scholarship at the University of Colorado, I think it was. His dad was a neuroscience. He was a neuroscientist. He was brilliant. He was working on government programs for DARPA to make essentially super soldiers. I think it was like they worked with like some major candy bar company. They were going to literally make like some kind of thing that a soldier could eat and give them superhuman endurance and stuff like that. This is one of the kids working on it. And then you have to ask yourself, brilliant PhD candidate, full ride scholarship, and he takes his scholarship money, buys a bunch of guns, and goes and kills a bunch of people in a theater. Why? Oh, well, he was having struggles. He had schizophrenia, but if you looked at some of the details, and I don't want to go into it all right now, but he was hanging around with some weird people. He had dropped out of school. They kept seeing him with two, what people might call handlers, who never let James Holmes out of their sight. That was seen all over campus, that he was with these two mysterious guys. And then he goes and does this horrific shooting and says, "I don't even know what happened." So some people think. And if you ever saw James Holmes on his arraignment, that guy was drugged out of his mind, or at least appeared to be. He literally was doing this. He was slow blinking. He had no clue where he was at. Judge kept talking to him. He just slow blinked. He had no freaking clue. And after that, they shut all the cameras down in the courtroom and said, "Don't put him on camera ever again. We don't want people to see how drugged out of his mind he is." And that led to people asking questions like myself. And I went down that rabbit hole for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is one of those things where I can understand why people don't want to. It's so much easier to just accept whatever story you're told, right? And so I'm going to, since you're on this particular topic, someone might say, "Well, Joe and DA, like, what's going on? Why do you think that this would be the case? Why would this happen?" Well, in a lot of cases, what happens after every type of mass shooting? Immediately, what happens? Gun control
Grab.
talk.
Yep.
Right.
Got to stop those weapons,
Now,
Yeah.
I'll say this to anybody watching this. Every single country, you can look it up, you can see it with your own eyes. It's happening right now around the world, that gives up the right to bear arms gets subjugated. Now and through history, that's one thing they all have in common. governments, look, every government wants to have total control, regardless what they say. Every government, doesn't matter what side they're on. They want control. That's what governments want. It's a machine. You got to feed the machine. They want more power, more control. And so once you disarm a population, you know, that makes it a lot easier to impose
Your will, yeah.
authoritarianism. And it's
Yeah,
happened. Australia, Canada, just look. England, look
yes.
at the UK.
Yeah.
Look, that in my humble opinion, the one thing that is the thread that's saving us from falling into an abyss of authoritarianism here right now is the Second Amendment. And I'll just say this: I'm going to have to rant a little bit for all the
Oh,
people out
shit.
there who say, "Oh, you know, it's you can't all these people, these mass shootings, et cetera, et cetera." Think about how that relates to what this episode is about, number one. And also, nothing is ever mentioned about the correlations that allegedly exist between the proliferation of widespread pharmaceuticals, psychoactive drugs, with the rise in mass shootings, right? No one wants
Yep.
that discussion to be had. And I actually saw a video with two ex-special forces guys, really sharp guys, discussing that very thing, that there is a correlation between the widespread use of psych meds and mass
Yeah.
shootings. Now, the media is never, ever going to talk about that, et cetera, et cetera. And
I,
whatever. Everybody can be politicized if they want. It is what it is. People are going to do what they want to do and think what they want to think. But think about
I do
those
want to,
things.
I want to second that, because I mean, I haven't done the research for a long time, but I want to second that. I was one of the people who started to see the connection between psychoactive drugs, basically antidepressants and stuff like that, and particularly 20-something-year-old males. If you put a 20-something-year-old male on an antidepressant for a long time and then cut them off, they tend to become homicidal, violent, whatever. And this was a known thing. And so I think it was a known thing, and the research played it out. And so I always said, it's funny how a lot of these shooters are often 20-something-year-olds. You find out that they were on antidepressant medications, and all of those is like a chemical cocktail. If done correctly, take them off those meds and they become homicidal. And oftentimes you'll hear the narrative will even tell you, well, he hadn't been taking his psych meds for a while. Yeah, because those drugs, when you come off of them, tend to make 20-something-year-olds in particular homicidal. So it's not a stretch at some point to say, allegedly,
Yeah.
Oh my God, allegedly, because we'll get sued by the pharmaceutical companies and we'll never be able to be on the air. But the point being is that allegedly that's the case. And so where I was going with that is well, I just freaking lost where I was going with that. The point being is that that's something you need to ask questions about, because again, it seems to be a common theme with a certain age and whatever. And it's just, I don't know. Just I had a bigger thought, but I lost it because you gave me the warning, and I'm like, oh shit! I just realized that the pharmaceutical company is going to come break my door down, so I decided to shut the hell up. But yeah,
I mean, the thing is, it does tie in, because if you think about the Patsy situation, like James Holmes was on psych meds, right? Now you could say, oh, he just wanted to kill people, or you could be conspiratorial and say he was steered towards it.
yeah.
And if you know the history of MK Ultra, they used drugs, to control, for mind control and things like that. So it is related. Like what we're talking about.
And to further your point,
related.
and to further your point, and I'm afraid to do it because again, I'm afraid when we talk Second Amendment thing, we're just going to get everybody dividing and whether guns are bad or whatever. But I do want to, I feel like I need to actually make the point. Just like you said, watch what the aftermath happens. Usually when there's a shooting, the first thing the media does is they say, an assault style weapon was used, an assault weapon was used. And then immediately afterwards, we've now decided we're going to pass a law on assault weapon ban because assault weapons were used. They even said, I even heard a news media article say an assault weapon was used against Charlie Kirk in one of the early stories. And then they changed it to, basically a bolt action rifle kind of thing. But they love to jump on immediately assault weapon, assault weapon, assault weapon. And then usually it's followed by, we need to take these guns off the street. And regardless of how you feel about guns, I feel like the point being is that what can you make the logical question? If the government, for example, and I won't try to beat the hell out of this. If the government is afraid of an armed citizenry, that if they're going to do things that you're not going to like, and they're afraid that there's pockets of militias sitting around practicing at the range and might decide to rise up against their government, and they have assault rifles, they need to disarm the population. Is it a stretch that someone might say, you know what? If something horrific happens and it was an assault rifle that did it, maybe we can convince America that the solution in America is to take everyone's assault rifles away. And then we're the only ones with assault rifles and the citizenry can't fight. So now, again, that might be crazy conspiracy theory or critical thinking. I don't know which one you want to go with. But
Well, I mean, look, I don't put anything past the government. I mean, it's no, like, this again ties in with cognitive dissonance. People like, no way, there's no way that these powerful entities, these powerful people, the government, whomever, would kill innocent people. Guys, when we go to war, anytime a military action is going to be undertaken, they know, they have actuaries, they know we're probably going to lose X amount of our own, and there's going to be this much collateral damage and blowback. They know this before they go into anything, any type of operation, right? So it's just hard for people to understand in the context of some of these big high impact events that evil stuff would be done, to innocent people. But remember, there's sociopaths out there. Sociopaths, it's a real thing, and a lot of people maybe don't fully understand the concept of sociopathy and what that means. I'll just real quick on this, because it is related, but I did take a class. I mean, this is years ago. It was taught by a retired FBI special agent. It was called Conflict and Violence. And we're having discussions about all kinds of stuff, different conflicts around the world, and violence and gang violence and things like that. And one of the things that he spoke about one day was that there's a sort of widely accepted theory among high-level law enforcement people that high-level politicians and CEOs are sociopaths.
Yeah, right.
And you would think that you'd want someone like that because of the decisions they have to make. These really cutthroat decisions that are going to have a negative impact on a lot of people. And so with thinking about that, these events, I guess it's hard to make other people sort of put it in perspective and accept that, these types of things are very possible and likely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's so, I mean, I want to make sure people understand neither one of us are saying this is what happened. We have to be careful with those kind of things. It's not an allegation. It's critical thinking. It's like, can we see any scenario in which that might make sense for somebody to stage an event, blame it on a patsy to achieve some goal at the end? And that's kind of at the root of all these questions. Are there patsies? Are they real? That's not the slide. The very opening slide in this thing was, are patsies real? Is it a myth? Does it really happen? And so that's where some of these slides at the end, by the Joe, we might we just might be able to skip some of these. Some of these are just kind of filler pieces. Do you have anything?
Well, hey, listen, I gotta pee real quick. So
all right,
have a little quick chat. I'll be right back.
I will. Let me riff on real quick why he's gone. The idea of something that I told him that we were going to talk about, but I don't know that we need to talk about it so much, him and I, which is the difference between a patsy and a scapegoat. And maybe I will ask Joe about it when he comes back. But so one of these slides in here talked about Watergate and a scapegoat. What's the difference between a patsy and a scapegoat? And I'll riff on that. A patsy, for example, and we talked about the difference between a knowing patsy and an unknowing patsy. So a knowing patsy might be somebody who said, look, I'm trained by the CIA. I'm going to do certain things. I'm going to let you blame me for doing it. And then you're going to cut me a deal later on, and I'll go live a great life, and I'll just never be seen for again. And I'll get my payday. I'll be your patsy. I'll be your Huckleberry, right? So that's one kind of patsy. Then there's the other kind of patsy, which is a person who's like, hey, look, can you be here at such and such a point and such a time? And they have no idea that when they go there, they're going to be fingered for a murder they didn't commit and they didn't even know it was going to happen. And they take the fall not knowing that by doing whatever they were asked to do made them a patsy and an easy mark to take down. But how is that different than a scapegoat? Because one of the things I want to talk about is, for example, when, for example, in Watergate, and I won't cover all the history of Watergate, but like if you have a president, for example, who's being accused of something horrible, and you don't want your president to go down, what you do is you find a scapegoat, somebody who works for the president, that the president can say, I don't know what was going on in my administration, but that happened completely outside of my knowledge. Hang that guy. And that becomes your scapegoat, because mutual people don't want the president to go down for it. So you just find somebody in your cabinet lower down and say, that guy went off the rails. And you probably were working with him in theory, in this theory, right? You were working with him, but you need a scapegoat because I am too important to go to jail or to get stepped down, or the country is too important to lose their president. So you can have a person say, I'll be the scapegoat, or the, again, unknowing scapegoat. We need someone to take the fall. It's not going to be the president. So let's look for somebody lower in the cabinet and say, oh, they went off the rails. He had no idea, or she had no idea about this. This is the person that we're going to blame it on. And it's a little different than a patsy. It's a scapegoat. So Joe, you're back. You probably heard me talking about that. We talked earlier that I was going to mention it. I decided to do it while you're gone. If you want to weigh in on the whole difference between a patsy and a scapegoat, this would be a great time since I just covered it. But
I mean, they're almost the same thing, you know. It's just that sometimes, I guess it's the context of it, you know, because a scapegoat could be not even a crime necessarily, right? It could be, you know, patsy tends to be. I've never heard it associated with anything other than a crime, like a major
yeah,
crime.
right.
Scapegoat could be you're on a news person, on a broadcaster, and you know they don't like your policy or things that you're speaking about, right? That maybe their advertisers don't like or something like that, and you become the scapegoat, you know, for something else, right?
Yeah,
So they
yeah.
find a reason to get rid of you rather than saying, "Oh, this person was, you know, changing the narrative." They just fire you, and then you never really find out the reason why unless that person speaks out about it. So that's like a form of a scapegoat, I think.
Let's talk about this last slide. I think this is one of the last slides that I kind of want you to get an opinion about, talking about how patsies can be sometimes recruited and manipulated by the intelligence agencies themselves to serve as a convenient fall guy. And you know, and this strategic use of individuals allows plausible deniability. Where maintaining power structures, their role is in covert operations rises ethical questions about justice and truth. There is an argument to be made that some people literally, and it's kind of maybe like what you talked about, like if you do something for us, we'll take care of you later. So we need something done. You're an asset for the government. You're trained in all kinds of, you know, different things, and we need something done. If you do it for us and take the fall as the patsy, then we'll take care of you later. So do you want to riff on that a little bit, or give what your thoughts
Yeah,
on that?
actually, that's actually a good thing because we talked about this earlier. Like the way I look at it, like the whole Patsy thing, it's not even an official, you know, government term or anything like that. A lot of people have adopted it to talk about cases like Luigi Mangione, you know, Tyler Robinson, even Bryan Kohberger. A lot of people have said he's a patsy. The question is it like a paid? Is it somebody that's involved in something that's maybe intelligence related or government related, and they get recruited for that very reason, right? Because
Yeah,
they could be useful for whatever this agenda is. Is it a person that gets manipulated into doing something that they were unwitting? They didn't, you know, have any idea what they were going to be doing. Like, I'll just say this about, I heard somebody, I wish I could remember who it was, speaking about the Charlie Kirk situation. Um, and they said, hey, you know, you get a kid and maybe he's trying to get into the intelligence agencies, and they say, "Oh, hey, look, we're doing an exercise. And this is all hypothetical. We're doing a little training exercise. All right, there's going to be this big event, and this is what you're going to do, and you're going to get in place at this time, and et cetera, et cetera." In this case, there's no solid evidence that he was carrying a rifle at all. So he gets told, let's just say this is one example of a type of patsy. He gets told, here, this is where you're going to be. And at this time, this is what you're going to do. And then maybe this person had no idea what was actually going to happen. Right. And so, but you're involved with really powerful people and you're sworn to secrecy. Right. When you're
Yeah.
dealing with really powerful entities, or it's like, look, you're going to carry out this operation for us, and then, don't worry, we'll take care of everything, and then, we'll deal with the rest of the stuff later. I mean, there's so many potential
Well,
ways I think that it could happen.
I want to break down an example that is a again, when I say this, I'm not saying I believe it happened this way. I'm telling you, I think this is a logical possibility. Idaho 4. Idaho 4. Bryan Kohberger was a brilliant criminology student, one of only two people that his professor ever recommended for a PhD candidate program from Pennsylvania to come out to WSU. He was a top dog in criminology and was going to do good things. He told his father, allegedly, I don't want to be a cop. I want to be a Fed, essentially. He wanted to be a criminal profiler. He wanted to be high up working with the Feds. Many people have said Bryan Kohberger himself is a Fed. He went there on Fed dollars. Pullman actually got a huge grant to research certain things. It was federal grant money for the National Institute of Justice. NIJ had funded part of that thing. And so people have said, what if Kohberger actually is a Fed and was working with the Feds? Now let me give you a plausible example of a after the fact patsy, that could a scenario. I don't believe it's necessarily what happened, but I want to tell you an after the fact. So you have a murder of 4 college students. You've got a guy who's a top criminologist guy in Pullman who wants to work with the Feds and has made it known from the very beginning. I want to work with the Feds. I want to work with the Feds. They can't find anybody. A month goes by after the murders. They don't have anybody. And they say, tell you what, we got a top criminology student who doesn't give a shit what people think about him. He'll take the fall as the fall guy. All we need to do is plant a few pieces of evidence to say he was there. He'll go undercover for us in the prison system, and he'll help break big cases and big crimes. Are you willing to do that? And if he's the kind of person that's like, I don't care if people call me a monster. I don't give a shit what people think about me. I want to be top dog in the. So there are people who think. Bryan Kohberger wasn't there. He's a plant from the government, and he literally is in prison only so that he can get in and be buddies with the Aryan Nation or whatever and get treated well, and then help them break giant drug rings inside the prison system. And then you have theories that Steve Gonzalez, the family member, says, let him be an asset for the Feds. Well, what the hell does that mean? Does he think that he's an asset for the Feds? So, those kind of things are just another possibility of a patsy who says,
All right,
I'm willing
you're
to take
getting me fired up right now. All right. It's your fault. I'm just
Okay.
telling you. I'm just disclaimer.
All right.
I'm going to tell you what I believe about the Idaho 4 case because it's related to this whole thing of a formalized patsy, right? One of my prevailing theories has been for a long time that, oh, by the way, you and Birdie last night, man, that shit was crazy. That shit was crazy, man. I like the way he thinks, though. I like people that think outside the box. But
Yeah.
this is a hypothetical situation. This is what I hypothesize to be a likely possibility. Somebody knew things and they were a threat. Somebody in the house had information that they weren't supposed to have. And that could be damaging to both the school and the feds, whomever. There is. We're not going to go all into detail, but I've told people before. Read Dark Alliance, that book. It's related to how our government. Most people know about it. The movie American Made with Tom Cruise was based on that, right? We were drugs and gun running, and part of the reason that it was going on was to fund black operations, right? So there was trafficking going on. it's not that big of a stretch to assume that either there was trafficking going on in that area that was either sanctioned by or being overlooked by official entities, and
Hmm.
somebody in that house knew too much information. And it's, I know it sounds crazy, but if you're talking about the types of things that we're talking about, it's not that crazy. And if I said this to you, I've said this many times, but I know I said this to you once before. Kohberger wasn't just like some kid who was going to school and wanted to be a town cop,
Yeah.
right? He's getting his PhD. I mean, he probably wanted to get into like profiling or some, higher level branch of law enforcement or intelligence, right?
Right. Right. Or intelligence.
So,
Right.
to your point, if if he's somebody that had, we don't know, we're never going to know if he applied for a job with the feds.
Right.
He could have applied for a job at the CIA. He could have applied for a job at the FBI. We're never going to know that information.
Right.
And so it's like, all right, we need you. We're calling you up to the big leagues. This is what you're going to do. To your point, I'm echoing what you were saying, but what I think it's very possible is that somebody in that house knew information. It also would align with what we saw in that surveillance video of the Jack S saying, "Oh, they can get you for that," or "They're going to get you for that," right?
Yeah.
So again, I'm hypothesizing. I understand it's people think that's insane. There's no way that type of thing could happen, but those types of things do happen, and they have happened. And if people understand when you get into the higher levels, like if there was some kind of operation going on, a top level clearance type of operation, local PD is going to go along with whatever the feds tell them to.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that the feds were the ones, because it's that usually is not the way it works. There's always like any plausible deniability, but they could have been aware of it. And enter the other BK, right? That's where things start to get a little bit sketchy. So so to your point about like these types of conspiracies and things that we've referenced, in this particular case, the reason why I never bought into the official narrative is, number one, because of the lockstep of all the mainstream media, and because somebody that has no history of violent crime does not all of a sudden commit a quadruple homicide. It's highly unlikely. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's highly unlikely. And so he would make a perfect Patsy, in
Yeah.
my
And,
opinion.
and to be fair, and this is the counter again, not saying that he is a patsy, but it's a theory to consider. I would argue the same thing we said, but America, if you have to try to explain to them why, how that happened and who he was working for and did he do that and could this have happened, start to check out. And they said, you know what? At the end of the day, he pled guilty. That's all I need to know. That guy couldn't get laid. He had to go kill 4 people because he couldn't get laid. I'm good at that. He said he did it. What else do you want to do? We're done. And because that's where most people, they just don't. And I don't know that I can blame them. They just don't have time to uncover grand conspiracies. They don't want to think about grand conspiracies. And at the end of the day, it's easy to say that story's over. The guy committed the murders. He said so. So I'm done. I'm done talking about it. He said he did it. So what's there to talk about? And only a
Right.
certain
And
number of people are going to care about asking bigger questions. But
right. And I've said this for so long. I've debated with people online about this. If it was an op, that means everything you know about Kohberger
is wrong.
could be
Yeah.
completely false. It's
Yeah.
part of an op. Like they could create any kind of background for somebody. They could put out any information they want about somebody. Now,
Yeah.
I'm not saying what I'm speaking to, and I think what you're speaking to is these things are possible,
Right.
right?
Possible. Right.
Right. And so when you're talking about major operations or larger scale things that go far up the ladder, we're probably never going to know the truth unless we find out down the road that there was actually a much bigger investigation going on, and
Yeah.
Kohberger was working undercover to sort of distract from that bigger thing, like a bigger investigation. So that down the road, you never know, or maybe we never hear another thing about it, and it kind of gets swept under the rug, and you know, Kohberger, gets released at some point from prison, and it's the media doesn't really talk about it. I mean, I'm not saying that I necessarily think that is exactly what's going to happen, but I'm saying these things could happen. We're just hypothesizing, we're just
Right. And I will say this. This is the horrible part. Even I cringe when I say this. If Bryan Kohberger, for example, gets killed in prison, more than likely the American people is not going to see that. What they're going to have is a headline in the news: Bryan Kohberger has been killed in prison. Most people will say, well, of course he did, because he was a killer and he killed a bunch of kids, because that's the narrative they told you. And that'll be it. And that'll be the end of the story. And those who believe that he was a Fed will say, you never saw a body because he's not dead. That whole thing was a narrative, and you just bought it hook, line, and sinker, because all you needed is to be told was Bryan Kohberger was just killed today in prison. And you'll go, oh, yeah, I knew that was coming. And you move on. You're never going to look into it. And so what are you gonna do? Like, it's just
yeah.
it's the easy answer. But
Look, we're dancing in, dangerous territory when we talk
we
about
are.
these things, because I understand, like a normie type person, just it'd be it would be beyond the realm of their way of looking at the world
Or
to
interest,
think
right?
of
The
things this way,
paradigm. Yeah.
and what I would say is that's what we're here for, is to talk about these things and have people that maybe didn't know about some of the things that we're going to be speaking about and that we've spoken about, to start looking into things, reading some books that uncover some of these things that have happened over time. And there's many, 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 many examples.
When
And
you said read
so,
a book, I went back to this old read a book, read a motherfucking book. I can't, where the hell's that? Anyways, I can't help it. You said read a book, read a book, read a book, read a motherfucking. Yeah. Anyways, educating yourself is great. I think you just gave what could be the best summary of our show. You sounded like you were closing monologue. You're like, look, just start thinking outside the box, ask critical questions. That's what we're here for, is to not say it happened. For God's sake, that let me, maybe we should put this at the beginning. We're not saying Tyler Robinson's didn't shoot Charlie Kirk. We're not saying Bryan Kohberger didn't kill everybody in Idaho 4. We're not saying Lee Harvey Oswald didn't shoot John F. Kennedy. What we're saying is there are reasons to believe it may not have happened that way. Put on your critical thinking hat and ask questions, and form your own opinions. Read a book. you know.
right. And again,
So
there's people that are quote unquote conspiracy theorists, more high profile people. And we'll talk about this stuff, I'm sure, at some point, that I think are controlled opposition.
yes,
I don't,
yeah,
and that's a really complicated subject, because it's you have to dig pretty deep to really get into it, to give examples about it. But, you know, like a Patsy, in this case, we're talking about Kohberger, we're talking about Tyler Robinson, we talked about James Holmes. Those are three examples of cases that where things don't add up, right? You
right,
have two guys that are both both PhD candidates,
yeah,
right? And now, after what happened with Charlie Kirk, the information comes out about the CAI at Utah State, which is really cute because
yeah.
it's a
Like
CIA
the
backed
CIA, but the
program.
CAI, right?
Right. And so, it's like, why does it always seem to be these people that are in these like elite programs and things like that, or
Top
have
students.
connections to elite things? There always
Yeah,
seems to be some other peripheral stuff that the media never talks about. And
yeah,
what I would argue is, I straight out, I can't even watch the mainstream media, because it's, to me, it's, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
right,
Once you
right.
see that they're just flat out lying to you,
Yeah,
once you have that paradigm shift, awakening, however you want to put it, you can't go back. right? It's like some of the
Yeah.
shit that they like. I have actually heard people say things in bars and stuff. Because I play in bars a lot. I have for many years, and like I'll be at the bar having a drink in between sets or something like that, and a conversation will come up about some current event, something that's in the media, and I try not to get involved because
You got to go back on
I have
stage.
to I have to be careful what I say sometimes, but I can't even believe some of the things that people believe.
Yeah.
I can't believe
Yeah.
it, what they
It's
believe.
sad.
And it's just,
Yeah.
oh man, I can't. All right, I'm going to share one of them with you because this was too funny. I can't even deal with it. It was like, it was one of the times where Joe Rogan was all over the news about something.
Yeah.
All right. And he was a big threat to the mainstream media, right? So they were always trying to play gotcha with him. And there was this younger woman, much younger woman, probably in her 20s, that was like, "Oh, I stopped watching Joe Rogan when he was telling people, this is literally what she said, to inject horse." This is what she said, which it
Right.
wasn't even close to what the thing that was said on the mainstream media was.
Right.
He was telling people to inject horse, are you ready?
Yeah.
Not horse paste, horse tranquilizer,
Right.
which is not
Right.
even the original story was bullshit, but this was not even close to the original mainstream media
Right.
story.
Right.
And I just had to just tap out at that point. I didn't
Yeah.
even say anything. I was just like, all right, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. It's
And
the
because it,
sheeple repeating what they've heard and not even getting it right when they're repeating what they heard.
right. And you're never going to be able to have a real conversation with somebody that would say something like that. So
Right.
that
Right.
kind of shit is scary that people
It is.
believe what they believe. And it's just, there's a price to pay to be a free thinker. You have
Yeah.
to, you definitely have to swallow a lot of razor blades if
Yeah.
you're when you're around certain types of people.
You're going to get kicked in the cojones a lot.
Yeah,
All right. Well,
exactly.
hey, Joe, this has been a really good thing. I think this is a pretty good place to wrap up. Hopefully, you got something out of tonight's discussion about Patsies and what they are. Again, we were not trying to lead you to make the conclusion of anyone being a Patsy. This is understanding the concept of what a Patsy is and why people who look at certain stories in the news say, is Tyler Robinson a Patsy? Is Bryan Kohberger a Patsy? Is Luigi Mangione a Patsy? This is why they ask these questions, because some people are familiar with what the term Patsy is and some of its history, like Joe and I. And so we ask those questions. It's like we sit down with our coffee mug and says, Bryan Kohberger was a Fed, prove me wrong. We just ask questions. And it's for this a debate, for establishing debate and basically helping people think critically. At the end of the day, I've said it before, I don't have a dog in the fight. If the person who did it, that they say did it, then so be it, and let the justice play out. But we're going to play devil's advocates. At least I am. That's my channel. I'm going to play devil's advocates with this and ask critical questions. Joe, what last thing? You've got a YouTube channel coming out pretty soon, right? On that you're establishing for the State of the Deep.
Yep. Yeah. I just have, I got a new computer and I'm some graphics and stuff ready to go. I was going to do my first episode this weekend. I may record something tomorrow, but
Sweet.
I'm hoping to have one episode out within the next week. And it'll be on
Well,
YouTube, it'll be on Rumble, and I'm sure I'll share it to Substack and on X as well. And I just want to leave people with this one question to think about. All the things that we're talking about. If you hear anything that we're saying and you want to dig a little bit deeper, ask ask the question first. Why would this, what would be a reason why someone would be used as a patsy in a given case. Why, across the board and the stuff that we're speaking about, really ask yourself, what would be the benefit? Who benefits? Like you were
Right.
saying,
Who would be being protected by naming somebody that didn't, do it? Well, who's protected? Who's being, who's getting away with it was a good question to ask as well.
right? Because then
So,
that
yeah.
leads you down the path of asking more questions. And
Right.
if I want to accomplish anything at all by talking about these things, it's to get people to ask more questions.
Absolutely. And that is a wonderful place to end for the night. Ask more questions. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Deep Devils. Joe, stick around for a few minutes so we can get the upload and hopefully get past all those glitchy moments that you said we were freezing up. I think the local files will upload and we'll get a clean edit. And so everybody have a great night. Thank you for checking in to another episode. Watch out for State of the Deep on YouTube. That should be launching pretty soon. We'll of course announce it when he actually has it up and running. But maybe if you want to get ahead of time, be watching for him. Take it easy, Joe. Have a great evening, and I can't wait to do it again.
All right. Bye, everybody.
All right, take it easy.